Pharmacy was very like, the drugs, the pills, the molecules. Journalism was kind of the same thing, except you had to find the stories and you had to dig deeper.
We have the power of AI under us all the time. And that changes the playing field again, right?
Metrics didn't necessarily guide where we did our storytelling, but it allowed us to see where the growth potential could be.
Welcome to FLAMCAST. Today we welcome a pioneering storyteller, a journalist, a culture maker, who for over 25 years has connected brands by streetwear culture defined by the zeitgeist, played out on a hyper-growth publishing platform. Our guest understood the importance of trends rooted in authenticity by bringing the streets to the catwalk and the deets to the kids. In 2005, what started as a European streetwear blog became the authority in trends. Highsnobiety is a multi-layered store and a democracy by medium, led by being the first. If you know, you know, right? Now, an educator. Jeff Carvalho, thank you for joining us. Let's start at the beginning.
Sure.
What drew you to media?
I'm a Generation X. I come from that generation where magazines were important and, MTV was a big part of what we were watching as kids here in the US. And I was just obsessed with media. I was obsessed with not so much like the celebrity of it, but being a little bit on the inside and having a conversation with, maybe the heroes I wanted. So that got me into student newspapers. I started making zines, and just in general, I enjoyed like making things. And some people make pottery, and I just happen to make, weird magazines on topics like music and fashion. So for me, it started there, and as the internet progressed, I was at the beginning of it. For me, I was, it was the early 90s when I was at university and I discovered...
What did you study at university?
So I went to pharmacy school, believe it or not. I went to pharmacy school because I thought that was like the career that a Portuguese kid would have.
So how did you get into streetwear culture?
When I decided not to go to pharmacy school, my other interest was journalism, clearly, because I had been, as I said, I've been writing. Pharmacy was very like, the drugs, the pills, the molecules. Journalism was kind of the same thing, except you had to find the stories and you had to dig deeper. And I think that, to me, was what was important. So how I got to what you call sneakers or streetwear, honestly, I think somewhere in the late 90s, I just had this moment where I was like, I think, there's a group of people out there that are really into something that a lot of other people are not into, and that happens to be sneakers, and it's quite strange, and I want to figure out what's going on.
So where were you living at the time? You went to pharmacy school, you dropped out. What was your home base?
Right, so I was in Boston. I had spent the majority of my time in Boston during university. So I was in Boston almost 20 years, which is also very disconnected from most trends, to be honest. It's not necessarily...
I was going to say, it's not New York.
It's not New York. Well, the advantage was that you could get to New York, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I think for me, once I did move to New York, which was in the early 2000s, in the 2010s rather, it was a whole nother world. That's when I was very much finding like-minded people, people that were also in the industry. But that's different than like the fandom. I mean, like the beauty of what happened online was that a piece of content or a story that was yours and yours alone now could be seen by a tremendous number of people. I mean, we take that for granted, especially how easy it is for us to communicate today, but...
How did you come to meet the founder of Highsnobiety and get into content?
So I was one of the very early players in podcasting, especially around culture.
What did we call it at that time? Because I don't think that had been coined.
It was a bunch of different words, but once Apple used the word podcast, it became that word, and that was like 2003. But for me, it was like, again, podcasting became another content platform, the same way that original web pages were a content play. And for me, I just was enjoying being able to like figure out how to innovate on those new platforms for a conversation that wasn't being had. Mm-hmm. So two things kind of happened at the same time. You had the growth of media online, blogging, later on becoming social media and things like Tumblr, et cetera. And then you had this burgeoning scene. And by the way, I don't think it was just streetwear. I'm sure it was other spaces that at the same time it allowed for all those people that were into streetwear to connect. It allowed for everybody that was into a specific, conversation to connect.
Mm-hmm. For me, I'll tell you how I got into streetwear and culture. I was an MTV kid. So, after like wanting to hear songs on the radio and wanting to record them, and you'd sit there and you would record them, and
Yes.
then it went to a disc,
Right.
and then it went to MTV, and then the different MTV channels, the VH1. That for me was when I learned about trends outside of Manchester, way, way outside. Now, that would be the only way that I could receive them and have interest
Right.
to them. And to me, that was what I know now as street culture. When you kind of left, I guess, shortly after school, and then you started looking at culture, you started blogging, there was MySpace.
Right.
There was also then, at the similar time, the beginning of Facebook, around about 2005. I think
Right.
I was an early adopter of Facebook. That was when there was a game change.
The game change is that you could have a two-way conversation, right?
Right.
From the perspective of radio or even TV. And to some extent, radio, the coolest thing was like the 800 numbers or like the toll-free numbers that you could call in and be heard. Very rare, that was the extent. Social media opened that up even farther, where now anybody could have a conversation. And by the way, you can connect with a brand or a person that you like, and the conversation can keep growing. So that was the moment, I think. And
That
for
was
me,
an aha moment for you, would you say?
the aha moment for me was Instagram. The aha moment for me was when it became completely visual. You could like send a link direct. Oh, by the way, I have a brand new story about a brand new release that nobody's seen. Here's the link to it. And I think that game was massive.
And when Instagram became, I guess, the primary social channel, and I would say arguably to this day, it kind of still is. Yes, we have a TikTok. Yes, we had a moment of Snap. But Instagram, I know for my group, millennials, still very much. I know a lot of my friends' kids, and I know you've got kids, Jeff. TikTok's a big deal, where again, it's become less static imagery, reels, but actual like whole
Right.
shows, dances.
Right.
Let's segue back into before that with Highsnobiety, when it stopped becoming a blog. And I think you really helmed it and you really helped shape it editorially to become, I guess, the founder of all things cool and bringing it to the fore for the people like me in Manchester
Very
that
kind,
couldn't have
very
access
cool.
to things
Yeah,
like that.
that was
It was around the same time as like your Dazed era, Dazed and Confused.
Right.
I'd like to dive into that with you.
That-
How did you conceive that? How did you build an architecture for that, a framework for brands to live? But it started with a cool factor. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I would say like if you fast forward that to where we began the framework of understanding was, the first time you post a story about a brand, the interaction is a couple views. The next time you would write the story, eventually the views would just keep growing. Back then you'd have like a ticker on the bottom of your webpage and you could count how many people had visited you. But I think the breakthrough for us was when the brands reached out and the brands were saying, we see the power of what you're doing. How can we get involved?
When did you become aware of metrics?
Metrics?
Because that was your currency, really, then.
Yeah, I think 100% of it was gut for the first 5 years of High Snob.
How did you fund it during that time?
So we were taking advertisement back in the day of like early banner advertisements. I actually remember that one of the first times we put up like a 1x1 square ad, and we had decided that we're going to have these 20 squares on the side, and that was going to fund
Old
us.
school real estate.
But it was great because the stores would buy all that space. That's all they wanted. The stores wanted. It wasn't even the brands that wanted that space, and I think they were carrying us. And it was really a lifestyle business, meaning we didn't see it as much more than two guys that were having fun and we were having, it was paying our lifestyle. I think once we started to look at numbers and metrics, we realized that there was certainly a business behind this. And metrics didn't necessarily guide where we did our storytelling, but it allowed us to see where the growth potential could be. It could see that, for instance, when we wrote about a watch, that was actually just as interesting to somebody that was visiting us for sneakers. So there were moments where you're like, okay, this doesn't have to be very linear. We can open this up and start talking about all of these other things that are adjacent to it. And that is sort of the bubble of what culture
those
is.
Adjacent things. Give
Everything.
me an example.
If in the center of it you put yourself, you are not, I'm sure you're not a single thought individual that has one idea. You're into many different things. Maybe some people are into, having the best toothbrush or drinking the best mineral waters. At that point, I think that's the understanding of
Curating a lifestyle.
looking for something that's higher caliber than what you can normally get, or something that's different. And I think, to me, the culture itself is just looking for more creativity than what's provided in the box today.
Do you think that played a big part in the rise of when brands realized, and I realized this with my work when I was working in-house at brands, is we needed to cultivate a lifestyle. It was more than just a product, an item, or we were known for one thing. We had to create and curate the lifestyle around what that product would be.
Right.
So how would she live? How would he live? And we started to create personas.
Right.
Did you follow that kind of format for Highsnobiety?
No. The site is very evergreen, meaning that, there's an assumption every day that there's a 16 to 24-year-old who's visiting that site. And every day there's a 16-year-old kid that's getting born and there's a 24-year-old kid that's turning 25.
So you were paying attention to those things.
Those things-
You were tracking those things.
What makes it amazing from the content perspective is that you allow for the creators that are inside, that are living that experience, to tell that story. I'm a Gen Xer. I'm not necessarily out in the streets as much as, a millennial or even a Gen A.
But at that time, you were the equivalent of Gen Z when you were growing up with Highsnob.
For sure.
Because I remember going on to Highsnobiety and didn't feel like I was seeing adverts. It felt like I was being shown next and new trends that were not in vogue. It was different.
I think the word content, funny enough, comes out of what you're talking about. Instead of talking about storytelling or writing a story, I think everything became content, which is a little different. And I think content, we need it, absolutely need it. We need different pieces of content, but the storytelling behind that content, I think, is really what allows you to be successful. So regardless if it was when I was at Highsnob at that time, finding an angle that, would tell a story of a product or a brand, we believe that we could do it most times better than that brand. Not for their whole story, not for their vision and mission, but
for that demographic.
But within that space,
specific.
we probably knew that customer better than the brands did. And
So
that
you
was
were
a hard...
net new acquisitions, I guess, for those kids.
Well,
It
eventually,
was something aspirational.
eventually brands wanted to come on board and be seen as well. Mm-hmm. And that's where things got very interesting with luxury, for instance, like Gucci and beyond. How do they begin to interact with what's online?
Can you remember thinking back, like, who were your top advertisers? And did you also police that to some extent because you needed to continue to carry and lead that zeitgeist, that cool? How did that affect? Or did you just take the money?
No, I think we always looked at it from the perspective of, can we tell the story? Is there a way, is this frameable within the purview that we use?
So did you set out guidelines for Highsnobiety in the way that a brand would? Or would they come to you and ask you to ideate as well? Like, when did that switch from you just selling advertising to you helping to tell that brand story to the segment that we've outlined?
And so I think you fast forward to 2000, 2015, around that time, maybe take a few years. But that's when I would say, like, branded storytelling began. You started to see things like the New York Times launching T Studio, for instance. Mm-hmm. And I think what they were seeing was that as a publisher, there was a church and state differentiation between publisher storytelling and the advertising sales side. And there must be another way of doing it. And quite frankly, I think that's what we saw, was like, look, we've kind of already been doing this for a while. We've been telling these stories through our lens. It's not that difficult for us to apply it. And I think also what I realized is that our readers were okay with that. Meaning that they
would come to you for those trends and they would stick with you and maybe dwell longer, hang out longer, because they felt a bit like they were in a community. That's what I felt like you guys built.
They for sure do that. I think they also are absolutely fine with knowing that the bills have to be paid some way. And if we can do it within the framework of advertising that we're doing, they're totally fine with it. That was a big moment. We're like, we're going to put ads on this. And
Did you feel the tension of, the integrity of the magazine, the integrity of what you were putting out and the information against the commercial aspects? You must have done to some extent.
Yeah, always. And, I'm sure that team still does that today. But I think, one of those fun moments is when you put a call out. I think we sent an email to maybe 200 people that we knew in the industry. Maybe they were stores, and hey, we're starting to sell ad space. And within not too long, this was like 2008, by the way. I remember them
Wasn't that long ago?
Yeah, it wasn't that long ago. But I remember the first one coming in.
What do you remember as I guess the figurehead brands of Highsnobiety, and that's when you knew that the cachet that you guys had, especially being European and for it to reach the US and beyond, you were very international. Before I'd even come to America, I knew Highsnobiety, and fine, I was then hanging out in London, I was living there, I was jumping around Europe, but I was surprised that even in America it was very, very big.
That was an interesting play as well, because, the relationship could be with EMEA, or it could be with Asia, or it could be with the US, because that's how businesses were split up. You asked me what brands come to mind. Clearly the footwear brands, they were the brands that were moving everything. People were styling and building fashion around sneakers that were being released at that time.
Yeah.
Streetwear brands were literally building colorways of their products to align with what was hitting the streets.
What do you remember as a really groundbreaking campaign where you remember walking into the office and you're like, we've nailed it, we've hit an absolute slam dunk?
I think in the mid-2010s, Gucci was looking to go more digital. They wanted to go younger, and they reached out to us asking us, what would we do? How would we shoot this? And we developed a campaign around 3 particular skaters from LA, and the campaign worked. It really did. And originally those assets were made to be on Gucci's Tumblr page, but they were so well received, I think, that they ended up purchasing rights to use them in store as well. I think people show up because when there's a good story or something interesting, or if things are put in front of consumers the right way, they want to see more.
So let's talk about that. I think there's a couple of ways of creating really good content. There's that access, and that I have to have this, and I know I'm going to have access into this brand, this product, this drop. And then, like you said, how do you receive it? So what environment what is your landscape? And then how do you visualize it?
IKEA did a Virgil Abloh collection.
How wild is that IKEA did Virgil Abloh? So random.
Cool.
So cool.
Yeah. That was a great project where they had come to us and said, hey, we want you guys to moderate, these workshops or these storytelling moments. I think Virgil at the time was doing...
This was in their internal teams in IKEA.
Right. So he was building... Wow. They wanted to build out this idea of office hours. I think I may have the name wrong. But so we did the launch in New York, and it was multi-approach. We took care of the storytelling, number one. They had come in and built out what they wanted to build out, especially display the collection, which was, of course, the purpose of the event. But they made it an experience. It was a little bit like IKEA, actually. You had to walk through a specific area and then turn into the remainder of it. And the event was great. I think there was a couple of cool things from it were, number one, the just amount of visuals that you get from something like that can live forever. And the best part about a collection is that collections are not, while there are drops, there are collections or things that stay on shelves for more than 48 hours.
There's still the sovereignty of the brand.
You still want to be able to get out there and tell that story. You then have an interaction with consumers who are able to come into that space and have an experience that's special. There's only 100 people in there that are, able to join this conversation.
So that's the access piece, isn't it?
Yeah. And then on top of that, and we're all talking about the physical stuff, what we did not know, which I thought was super cool, was that IKEA had actually brought one of the items in bulk to give as a giveaway to people that attended the event. Not to in any way diminish what we did, but that story sold itself very well. We could, it was a direct hit for us.
How would you, going back to, I guess, what would you call the pinnacle, the height of Highsnobiety under your guys,
When
under
I
your
was-
tenure?
I think probably when I stepped away, which was, it's still
22.
growing. Yeah, it was about 22. But the immersive thing I think is interesting because it kind of started off as like a photo booth, right? First it was like the photo booth. And then it became these things that maybe it was like a 360 rotation, but it's become so much more than that. And that's the thing I'm obsessed with. Like, how do you begin to do storytelling in a way that's very immersive, but that a consumer is okay with?
So it's interesting. I remember being at Spring Studios when we were trying to do shoppable video, and there's that old phrase that you can be too soon to do something and then you can be a minute too late. One of the things that we weren't able to do at the time was directly shop via content, and I think, the game changer for me was Amazon one-click checkout.
Sure.
Where you could just boom, boom, gone. So within 3 seconds...
They patented that, by the way?
Absolutely.
It's
Of course they did. That was their absolute aha moment, but they've spent years putting together the logistics of it, which obviously we need to get the stuff. But that succinct CTA, that succinct buy, made people buy it, and then it was forgotten, and the next day it was in their physicality.
They got us hooked.
They got us hooked. And I think as we get more into mixed reality and immersive, we see all of this drop in the retail stores, but I still think they're so important, retail experiences. Experiential is through the roof in a physicality sense. I think mixed reality is now going through a moment that when we were trying to do shoppable video, it was too soon because you couldn't track anything. There's a lot of friction, all of this stuff. How do you think mixed reality would have made you approach Highsnobiety differently had you had the skills and that Gen AI underpinning it today?
Oh my gosh, that's a tough one. I think we would approach it the same way we did most technologies, which is let's take a look. Is there an audience that demands this, that needs this? And I think then would have probably been a little too early, but it's clear today that they do want it. I even look at things like live shopping. Live shopping to me has not had...
You mean like HSN? You mean like the shopping channel?
That stuff is still quite popular.
It's very popular.
But live shopping, say, I believe Amazon does a live program today where you can go on and they have an influencer that's actually showing you product. That breakthrough I don't think has come in the States yet.
We're talking a lot now about generation AI. And what that really means is we have the power of AI under us all the time. And that changes the playing field again, right?
I think it's super interesting to use AI. I use it constantly to build
Well, you've been
agents.
teaching me how to use it as well. And you told me something really interesting, that how you teach it, how you train it. I would love to understand how you bring that into your work at Istituto Marangoni with your students. I know that you're an educator now, and how has that laid into the curriculum?
Like most universities, the school has a policy around AI.
And Jeff, maybe just pause you for a minute. Explain maybe what Istituto Marangoni is and the kind of courses and what they do.
Sure. It's in line with the work I did before. So Marangoni is a 100-year-old school in Milan with branches around the world. The school here caters to fashion students in the United States. We have a lot of Latin American, South American students. I focus in on trend forecasting, which is a bit of a history lesson into how we got to where we are today. A lot of cultural conversations around how military work inspired, Yohji Yamamoto as an example as a designer. And I teach a lot of branding, and it's part of that branding in thinking about how you begin to tell new stories. For me, AI is a tool, and as I've told you, in my mind, it's the people that know how to use AI that are going to really move a little quicker in my mind. And for me, as I'm teaching, I've used agents to begin collecting stories or keeping its eyes on what's happening on social media for me around specific topics. For instance, I'm constantly interested in menswear trends. You can build tools using AI that allow you to use public information that's out there and scan for conversations. And I think that's fun for me. That's my focus with it.
Very interesting. How do you put that into a curriculum? And more importantly, how do you think that influences, along with the content creation of Generation AI, where it's still content, isn't it? But it's AI generated. And again, at some point we used to call it computer generated imagery, CGI.
Right.
It still had to be made. And then talking about Gen AI, it generates itself, but it still has a teacher. There's still a master at the moment. There is still a teacher.
Yeah, there still has to be a teacher
there.
there.
And there is an end recipient.
Wait, for me, my students, we focus a lot on AI that allows us to build visuals against development of a proposal, as an example. So, as an example, in my trend forecasting class, I'll give them an assignment where they break out in groups and have to very quickly act as stylists and put together looks, and then build a framework around where this will be shot, location. And AI allows you to generate a lot of mock-ups, and those mock-ups can then be used to actually go do a shoot. And that's where I see the value of it.
Talking about content and commerce, obviously Highsnobiety became and was acquired by Zalando. And I know that you're drifting away and going back to becoming, or Highsnobiety are becoming, an agency of sorts. That, I presume, will be an AI-focused agency. What do you think the next model is when we look at the landscape of publishers, brands, agencies, and how do they all play together?
Well, everyone's going to try to keep it as traditional as possible because nobody likes that much change, and change tends to break things. I think publishers are pretty scared of AI. I think advertisers are quite frightened of AI. If what happens to the page views that we used to measure ourselves against when you're within a AI agent that's giving you a result that may not be connected to a place that allows you to see ads, as an example. QR codes have been around for 20 years.
And I remember new, right?
I remember a story 10 years ago at the Denver airport, one of the busiest airports in the United States during the holidays. And there was supposedly a poster that had a QR code on it. And over that weekend, millions of people crossed that poster, and I think they got less than like 100 people to scan it.
Yeah.
Come around, come
it's
COVID.
It's a barcode at the end of the day.
Come
We've had
COVID.
barcodes forever.
Now we're just in a place where we don't want to touch things, so we scan it. And it's great. It's opened up a lot because those barcodes allow you to share a lot very quickly. I love a good barcode, I'm not going to lie.
As we talk about QR codes and barcodes that have now become that, we get into mixed reality. So you made a great point about COVID. You shine your phone on a code or on an image. And now, with the ability of Gen AI and different softwares and different tech, maybe it's a FLAM, maybe it's something else, you get immersive content.
Mm-hmm.
How is that going to change mixed reality with shopping in the same way that Amazon one-click checkout did? How do you see that converting?
It's funny because one click allows you to quickly step through it. I think immersive, I think about the gamification a little bit of shopping.
Right.
When it comes to high-end premium limited edition releases, what you're seeing more than ever is games being played in order to reach there. Tom Sachs in the middle of doing a drop now around one of his service shoes that required you to download an app and work out and exercise. And if you completed all those missions, you were able to purchase that shoe. I think you're going to see the same around experience. You're going to be able to have a moment. I think you see it today where you can step into an environment, be part of mixed reality. And that, by the way, can not just necessarily happen where the consumer walks in, but you can see that at stadiums, during rock concerts these days, how things can be synchronized in some manner. I think the future is going where the consumer is. And again, as you said, with one-click checkout, how do you reduce the friction of being able to purchase something?
So as we move from barcodes to QR codes to immersive content to mixed reality, we're creating a new multi-channel playing field, really, in the same way that you did a while ago at Snob, in the same way that traditional publishers have done. But I think what we're really doing is democratizing content and the way that people are able to access it. How do you see mixed reality in the world of the students that you're working with today, and how they're going to go into the world of work and the jobs that they may take, and then how we're going to shop and experience in the future with mixed reality and immersive content?
So our students love technology that allows them to create. right? That's why they're there. They're there to be, in many cases, some are stylists or business students or designers in general. So they're already using tools that allow them to see a 3D visual of a garment that they're making. So they're already experienced in seeing that visual. They're also heavily, on social media. I have some students are actually influencers, as they would say in the class. They're out there telling stories in ways that, quite frankly, no other generation has. In terms of mixed media, it's going to be interesting to see how the tools themselves also begin to change, right? What does it look like when a Meta Oculus or what's happening with Apple becomes something that's even more embedded in what we do today?
What do you think about that hard tech where there's VR glasses? For me, that's a lot of friction. I don't love it. I want it to be straight through my phone. Like, that for me is everyone's primary screen.
Right.
Would you
It's
agree?
not. I wouldn't say that's a primary screen for.
It's
There are
not.
people that have it as
It's
a
a
primary
luxury
screen.
screen. It's something different. It's not something for everybody.
I think we already see this a little bit when you look at ads in the Times Square that have figured out how to use depth and perception of depth to look like objects are flying out of LCD screens in Times
high
Square.
fidelity content exactly directly on your phone or on a screen. And then you can add another layer whereby you can screen your phone over it and you can see the on acid version.
Right. I've actually seen that at a sporting event where as you put your phone over it, it allowed you to see a data set against the athlete that was being shown on screen. And that's not through mixed reality. That's me and my phone that wanting those extra stats.
If there's one thing that you would say to your students, to Gen Z, to millennials and Gen X, of what they should be learning for their jobs right now and for tomorrow, what would it be? So if we start with your students.
I think across the board, don't be so nervous about AI and go into those tools and start trying things.
And then what about millennials?
Don't let it answer your questions, but I think you need to be paying attention to the engines and playing around with them. Find one that's interesting and begin to do some research.
Be open-minded.
I believe you should be open-minded.
In the same way that you created something next to new, I still think the best is yet to come. Would you agree?
For sure. Tech is making life better. It shouldn't make life worse.
Completely agree with you. Jeff Carvalho, it has been a pleasure to speak to you today.
Thank you
so much. Thank you so much, and we will see you next time on FLAMCAST. Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you.